Okay. Can everybody hear me in the back row? Awesome. So first of all, tons of thanks and gratitude. The fact that on day one of a Vegas conference, you came out to the coveted, highly sought after 6 p.m. speaking slot. And those of you that also thought ahead and brought a cocktail with you, I really appreciate that. So I expect lots of laughter and, man, that guy's amazing. How do I get more? So I appreciate that. And Winnie, thanks for the introduction. Thank you to Bo, everybody that's involved in the I Am The Cavalry track for letting me come in here and talk again. Second time. Last time I was here 2 years ago with Dave on a panel. And I'm super happy to be able to provide my experience, the perspective that I gained from my time in the Air Force, my time working in government, hence the talk title and the idea of, or how I learned to love a Govvie. I'm no longer there, and I'll go through my background in a little bit. But I want to be able to share that with you, share it with the security researchers, the hacker community, to help you guys appreciate what goes on and motivate you to participate in all the different efforts that are happening. They're government efforts. They're not always the best and not the way we want them, but they're available, and there's lots of good ways that you can contribute your knowledge. So the big thing that when I go through and talk about this that I want to bring out, I was in the Pentagon in 2014. It was my last assignment, prison sentence in the Air Force, and I left in the fall of 2017. So I saw both administrations. I am not going to talk about politics. I am not going to go there. If you bring it up, I'm going to shut you down. I don't care what your thoughts are on either administration. So I just put that out as a caveat so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, with that, let's get rolling. So, I'm an expert. I'm up here talking. Bo thinks I'm an expert, but what makes me an expert? So I want to dispel some rumor. Bo said I'm an expert. That's why I'm going to keep using that because he's sitting right here. But when I was making this talk, I found this on standard on the internet, on Twitter. And there's a nice gentleman in Australia, and I thought it was perfectly fitting that something happened in Australia, and he was commiserating about the fact of, oh great, here comes another expert. And my thought was, uh-oh, I might be that guy at this talk, so let me see if I fit this. So a little bit hard to read, I understand. But on number one here, it says an old bloke with gray hair who used to work for CASA, which I believe is the Australian version of the FAA. I could be a little younger, I'll give you that. I keep my hair cut short, so you can't really tell if it's gray. And I didn't ever work for the FAA, so I don't fit that. Or I'll give you maybe a maybe on that at least. Worked in the Terminal 3 in Gloria Jean's store as an employee. Nope, I definitely didn't do that. I'm not really an Uber driver, but I have 2 daughters. And when they want to go somewhere, there's no waiting. So yeah, I'm definitely in that. I'm on Twitter. I live near Dulles. I live near Reagan in the DC area, but not really. So I'll at least say no there. I'm not an Australian comedian. That I'm 100% sure of, and I don't have a book. So when I talk about expertise, at least I can give you that idea that I bring something. That's what I used to do. I don't get to talk about it much, so at least I get to show a cool picture because I'm talking about airplanes, and it was awesome. That's an F-15, and that's no shit me. There's not many of those, so I'm like, that's me. That you can't tell. That could be Bo for all we know. But I'm telling you, it's me. I swear. That's right. So that's the only way you don't know. So that was a mission flying over presidential protection. I can't remember what country it was in Europe, but I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool. And then that was an F-15, and then I moved over to F-22. So that's my background when I was in the Air Force. That's my nice corporate resume slide. So you can all go, yes, Steve's boss. He really did give a talk, and he really did mention that he works at T-Rex Solutions. That's all I need from you. So right there, I'm covered. But I'm a CISO right now. So I don't have a deep security background, leadership, time in the Air Force, things of that nature. I am learning about what you all do. I'm appreciating the hell out of it, and I got some super talented guys on my team. So T-Rex Solutions, like I said, CISO, we do federal IT contracts. We don't do anything with aviation cyber. So everything I'm talking about is Steve's opinion on things, the other key thing to pull out. Other than that, some things I'll point out. I know it's hard to read, but things I just want you to see is my time in the military. All of it, or a vast majority of it, was flying. Had a great time with that, great assignments around the world. My last 3 years, as I mentioned, were in the Pentagon. working on cyber policy, and that's where I really got into things, and I will say back into things, because previously working with the Navy in 2006, when they were looking at 2030 and beyond, when we talk about cyber warfare, and I'm going to say cyber, I'm going to say cybersecurity, and I apologize for that because I hate it, and information security is the correct thing, but just the idea of when I described this is what the Navy was working on, and that's where I got back into understanding what's going on in the security community, and then just staying with that as I went into the Pentagon, working cyber policy. So a lot of things, interagency, what's going on with DHS, what's in FBI, FAA, CIA, all the things associated with military cyber operations, working with the National Security Council staff. Very interesting seeing how the sausage is being made in government, so somewhat scary there too. All the things on this slide, what I really want to highlight is this bottom left corner, namely ShmooCon Fire Talk winner, inspired by Beau Woods and some cocktails. My friend Alex Romero and I gave a talk there. So I will at least say, having given talks, having been here before, I thoroughly enjoy trying to contribute to everything that's going on. I don't bring the deep technical background, but hopefully, again, sharing those perspectives and experiences that will help you guys understand what's going on and motivate you to help contribute to these efforts. So, as I go through, I'm talking about aviation cybersecurity, no surprise there. What I want to do first, though, in the upfront portion of this, is give you some background, because I think there's so many things in when we talk about this that gets confusing. Well, do you mean the airplane or the airport or the thing on the airplane or the thing over here? And so it's just aligning perspectives. And so it's the idea of what's going on and how do I approach it so that you understand. You don't have to agree, but at least you can see the approach that I'm taking when I talk about these things. So the aviation ecosystem, you probably have seen similar charts to this before. This is not anything original. I can't remember exactly where I got it. Sure, I stole it from somewhere. But the idea is we typically talk about aviation cyber, we read articles, and we hear about things like the airplane, the commercial aircraft, the passenger airplane that you probably flew coming out here, if that's how you got here. There's the manufacturers, there's the airplane itself, there's the software on the airplane, but then there's the airport. The airport is its own ecosystem. There are so many entities on an airport, whether it's the aircraft, the airline companies, the baggage people, all the things that make an airport work. They have their own little ecosystem of things, as well as all the navigation systems, both in space, in the air, on the ground, and all of that has suppliers and chips and hardware and software. And every single icon that you see up there, every single arrow connecting those is where a vulnerability can exist. A vulnerability that can be exploited. So when I say the aviation ecosystem, it's not just the airplane that we typically hear about. It's the entirety of what we have to worry about in this very complex problem. And when we're trying to talk about who's doing what and how are we going to solve it. Another thing that typically comes up, it helps having analogies. You hear about ICS systems. You build something, you put it in a electrical plant. It sits there forever and ever. It's remote. You remote connect to it. You run it. You never have to go out and replace it. Some of that is valid when we talk about aircraft or a navigation system that's out in the middle of the country that I would use as I'm flying from where I used to be based in Florida all the way out here to Las Vegas to do training up at Nellis. And there are out in the middle of the desert these nav aids that nobody goes to very often. So again, like ICS, they're made to last. They're made to be monitored and not have a lot of interaction. The same analogy holds true that we've learned with ICS. That's a terrible idea when we're talking about vulnerabilities that need to be patched and fixed. So we're learning some of those same lessons in that sense. Where I will say the analogy doesn't work very well is understanding and agreeing with the idea that ICS has impact on lives when it comes to power, water, things of that nature. Totally agree. But I think where we get excited with airplanes is airplanes are up high, and if something goes wrong on an airplane, we're all going to drop and hit the ground and die. So it's not the same analogy. I'm not saying that's the case with when I talk about aviation cyber, but that's what I mean by we get excited when we think about those things. So the other thing I want to bring up, most dangerous versus most likely. And that's the idea that when we hear aviation cyber and we think about hacking an airplane and we think about how it can make an airplane crash, we get very excited about it because we should. It's a big deal. People could die very directly, very immediately. So it's something, as we're talking about, that we should be talking about. And it's also, because it's exciting like that, that's what typically comes out in movies. And so that's what I think, in general, that we all tend to gravitate towards and go, well, we got to solve this problem with the airplane because it's the biggest, baddest, most worrisome thing out there. Absolutely, it's the most dangerous. The chances of the technical capability, the vulnerabilities getting exploited, relatively low. Okay, I won't say they're zero, but I'm saying they're less than the most likely causes that they aren't as bad, they're not as fun, they don't make for a good movie, they're boring. And I'm talking about things like if we're messing with a pilot's navigation capabilities, or we're interrupting their ability to communicate, or we're making that communication untrustworthy, that, I will tell you from my flying background, is a big worry, because I may not know that's happening. And so what I'm trying to do is make sure that we appreciate the idea of, we tend to think about these really, really bad, terrible things, but on a daily basis, this is what I worry about more. It's that low-level boring stuff. Because what I want you to imagine is, I'm flying around my background in an aircraft all by myself. That's where I used to work. I long for the days, so I get to at least say, I remember that. I was never in a commercial aircraft where I'm in there with somebody else helping me out. But the idea is, when I'm trying to handle an aircraft problem and I can't talk to somebody and I can't navigate or I don't trust what's going on, and now you throw in bad weather, that makes my job harder. So I have procedures to handle that. I have training to handle that, but it just makes it harder. That's incredibly dangerous. It's just not fun to talk about, and that's a boring movie to show me flying around in clouds trying to handle a problem. So again, that's just an appreciation of the differences there. Again, I'll talk about the idea that if I was flying around by myself, I'm always a part of a team, right? So I've got other aircraft with other pilots there to help me out. I can communicate to folks on the ground if I need them to help me out with a checklist, help me fix a problem or understand the problem and hurry up and land. Translates over. I'm not a commercial pilot. I don't have that background. But in a cockpit with multiple people in there where they can talk to each other, the same concepts. They can talk to their company. They can talk to air traffic control. They can get help solving those problems. The ideas translate across even though it's different aircraft. And the idea is that they can work together. Another concept that I've heard about every now and then, I don't think it's taken hold, and I'm glad, is the idea that, well, we need pilots to understand hacking. Some pilots are a bunch of monkeys, and the last thing you want them worrying about is hacking, because flying's not that hard. Anybody can do it. The idea that I need to learn how you do your hacking things and how that makes my aircraft do what it's doing, that's not where the focus should be. The focus should be, I have a problem. I know I have to hurry up and land, I have to mildly tense up and land, or eventually I have to land. But I know I have procedures in place. So even in the example I gave you, bad weather, I can't navigate, I can't communicate, I have lots and lots of backup procedures. So understanding and appreciating the hacking threat, if we're going to talk about a malicious actor who's getting there and doing things, totally with you on that. But again, some of the discussions I've heard have gone off on the rails of, well, we need to teach them all these things and help them troubleshoot problems in the airplane. I know how the gas pumps work inside the airplane. I know how they connect to the engine. I'm not going to fix that when I'm flying. So again, from a pilot perspective, just where on the scale of what I need to worry about is what I want to pass on to you. Okay, so with that, when we talk about aviation cybersecurity, this community, any of these new pictures you've never seen before? Does anybody know who that is on the left? What article that's talking about? Who is it? Nice. How about in the middle? Chris, thank you, RenderMan. You're my plants. You're done for the rest of the day. How about this guy on the right? That's right. So if I talked about, hey, what's going on in the aviation cyber world, and RenderMan, I didn't have a good article for you, so I did not leave you out on purpose, my friend, I promise. This is what I think this community would talk about. I've given this talk before from the opposite side to a government audience, and they're like, who are these guys? They had no clue. We know who they are, and I'll say we as somebody who likes to participate and help out, but you guys with the technical knowledge, you know what they're talking about. And this is what is presented out there, what's pushed out in a talk or in a story. It goes through the media filter and they do their best, but they often come out very sensationalized, whether or not that was intended. So I'm not judging on the validity of these claims. I'm not judging on what they wanted. I'm not talking about that. But this is what's typically out there. And my point in talking about this is the idea that I don't think this is the most effective way. It makes perfect sense when you have no other avenue, when companies aren't listening to you, when the government is not helping you out. This is the way to get attention. Totally with that. I think there's a better way to do it. And I think things are starting to change in a way that you all have better ways, better avenues to engage and get attention and get your expertise appreciated and used. Okay. The other story that'll come out, has anybody ever heard of this one? November 17. Yeah. So there's a government dude out there saying this is what's going on with hacking. This is what's happening. Buy me a drink later, I'll tell you hours and hours of stories because I was still around when this was happening. But this one pissed me off because this isn't the whole story. There are elements, absolutely, totally agree with you, but there's a whole lot missing. But my point is it comes out as sensational, whether or not it was intended, and it misses a whole lot. So when my mom asked me, do I have to worry about flying? Number one, she doesn't because she doesn't even know this is going on. So it doesn't affect the flying public, didn't work in its intended consequences. Or if she does, no, Mom, things are good. We got smart people helping out to fix things. And nothing changes. So again, I think there's better avenues than just using media, and there's lots of ways to build on that. I think it's been a force for getting things to change, but there are other things that have grown and gotten better that'll be even more useful in the future. So, with all that being said, what's really going on and what's happening through here? So back in 2017, Pete Cooper, connected, Bo Woods can tell you when he was working at the Atlantic Council, Josh Corman was there at the time also, sponsored by Thales, wrote an aviation cybersecurity report. I helped contribute a small part to that, but it was a great report, the first time of pulling all of that ecosystem and different representatives and getting their views to come together and talk about what are the real problems that we need to address here? What are the things we're worried about? And it got the concept out there that it's the flying public that we're worried about. It's the fact that they trust what's going on. And if you think about it just strictly from a U.S. perspective, the idea that's very important air travel to our economy, to our security, and the public's trust in that. We know airplanes crash, but we still get on them and go fly, right? Manned flight is scary, I get it. But we still get on them as passengers. So we want that same concept when it comes to cybersecurity. Things may be broke, but we want the public to trust that it's going to get fixed the same way that we fix safety problems. So I think that report did a great job of doing that, and Pete did a really good job of pulling all those different stakeholders together and representing that. Has anybody ever read this? National? You have? Holy crap, there's two of us. That's awesome, thank you. I only read it because I was putting this talk together. Otherwise, even in government, I may not have, so thank you. Yeah, exactly, had to do something. So, National Strategy for Aviation Security. This report came out in November of 17. This strategy came out in December of 18. The strategy previous to it, 8 years old. The first version of the strategy came out right after 9/11, and it was addressing aviation security issues. The second iteration that came out 8 years before this one didn't have a lot of cybersecurity, but it was building on all those same mostly physical threats. This version that came out was started and was being worked on even when I was still in government, 2014 until I retired in 2017. Then you had the administration changes, and then it had to get restarted, and it had to have the new administration's twist on things like you would expect, but it got published. And it has better cybersecurity considerations in it. They're not great. I think they focus too much on things like airline ticketing systems and some of the more basic stuff that we typically hear about in media reports. But in general, it's an improvement. I'm not telling you things are great. It only took 8 years to have this incremental improvement. We're talking about the speed of government, okay? So that's the reality, but the idea is it's getting better. And so how do we push that along, and how do we help keep that get better, faster from there? Other things that are being done in government. early on, when I got introduced to aviation cybersecurity while I was working at the Pentagon, so I'm representing DoD equities when I'm sitting in the Security Council, the staff meetings, and taking things back, getting my boss ready to go when he's talking at the higher level meetings. But getting connected and working on a charter to get folks in the US government to work together, to get DHS, to get FAA, to get DoD. We agree to work together on this problem. We're going to look at the policies, we're going to look at the testing and what we can do to solve these issues. That Aviation Cybersecurity Initiative has continued on, it's grown, and it is now a major initiative with those 3 agencies. So they are looking at these problems, they're finding ways to address these issues and help fix things, again, all the way from the policies on down to the actual testing. It's not fast, it's very ugly, it is absolutely watching the sausage being made, but it's getting better, and it's continuing to get better from there. So at least I can give you that as the good news story. So with all of that in mind, it's nothing but a rosy picture, I know, but the idea that it's a very complex system. There's not any one entity, one agency that's running the whole thing. And if you think about it, what I showed you before, that's the US version of things. Now connect that to the other countries, and now we're talking a global issue. So there's even a higher level of consideration to deal with there. So there's a lot going on. The stakeholders, I primarily have talked about the government and industry side of this. They don't always agree. We had to have meetings to write a letter to agree to sign for 3 agencies in the same government, all working for the same president, to work together. I kind of feel like that's embarrassing, but that's how the bureaucracy works. I appreciate that now. And what I also appreciate is being able to get the attention in the right place to get things done, having seen it on the other side. So I can at least give you that little glimmer of hope. Big picture, yeah, there's no doubt. Everybody agrees we want to get after this problem. We want to fix things before it becomes a major issue. That's the goal, no doubt there. And again, the big things that you'll see come out, whether it's I Am The Cavalry talking about it, you'll hear about it at DEF CON a little bit, is the idea of we're looking at reliable, safe, trustworthy air travel. And again, go back to the report that I told you about that Pete wrote dealing with aviation cybersecurity. It's the public's trust. If we stop worrying about how each agency is doing things and we think about this is what matters to the public, whether it's our friends and family, whether it's us, whether it's just the American citizens worrying about this and then how that translates to other countries, absolutely. And it's the resiliency of that trust of making sure that when something bad happens, because it will, that we can get it back quickly. And so no doubt that that's happening from there. So I told you before I'd given this talk previously, and the perspective that I chose was presenting that same background, getting everybody thinking about it the same, but it was a government and an academic audience. So before I go too far and make any big assumptions, I know a couple of folks in the audience. Who here is from government? Okay, good. Yep, I'll say former government. Awesome. Academic side of things? Student? Yep, all right, sounds good. Security researcher, hacker community? Okay, yeah, so pretty good mix. What other did I miss?
Media.
Media, thank you. Awesome. Okay, all right, cool. All right, good. So the audience that I talked to before, I took them through and I said, hey, government people, what do you think hackers look like? Here's the stereotype. And then I took them through, here's what they really look like. So I'm going to give you guys the opposite of that. And nice enough, my friend Brad Haynes decided to join me today, so he's a good example, so I appreciate that. So what's a government worker look like? Is that about right? Other than who's sitting in the room, so you don't count. That's probably okay. What's the stereotype of government workers? I can't say it because of what my company does, but you guys can tell me what you think. Do they like to do they like to make risky decisions? No, not usually, right? What are other stereotypes that you think about when you think of a government worker? Anything? Curmudgeon. That guy. He's awfully happy right there, right? Right? Good cartoon. The idea of what's going on, right? Another good movie. Standard dude in his briefcase. Okay, look at this guy. That to me looks like the perfect stereotypical government worker. And anything that you have in your mind of what they represent and how they do things and what's going on. So you can imagine where I'm going with this. That's not necessarily the case, okay? I gave you some examples. It's not pretty, it's not fast. We all want it to go faster. There's a lot of different considerations going on. but there are some good, smart folks who are trying to work through these problems. And I happen to know 3 of them. These are my friends. So, and unfortunately, they still look exactly like the stereotype, except for nice Monica over here. So my friend Steve over there on the left, he's also retired Air Force, both active duty. Then he served reserves and he retired from there. He got brought back. He was working in the Pentagon. And he was a large part of that Aviation Cybersecurity initiative that I talked about and getting connected where I worked at the time and then having a flying background that worked out conveniently, saying, good, let's start working this. And so he helped push a lot of these ideas along. Randy, I showed you him. He looks like a stereotype. And I said, Randy, I'm going to tell everybody you look like a stereotype. And he's like, yeah, I know. It's okay. So retired Army helicopter pilot. He understands things. He's now leading the DHS portion of the Aviation Cybersecurity initiative that I told you about before. He understands what's going on. He is trying to help, whether it's a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program or he's trying to find ways to smartly engage at a pace the government can be comfortable with the security researcher community. So again, he understands what's going on, but he's pushing hard and he's trying to do good things to get you guys, a big stakeholder in this problem, because of the expertise you bring, involved in helping to solve these. Again, working with the government. And then there's nice Monica over here, and she started off in DHS, and then she was on the Security Council staff. Totally gets it. So when we went to her and said, Monica, you're on the Security Council staff, and we're trying to work this little insurgency over here. We're trying to get our bosses to pay attention to what's going on. The best way to get the boss to pay attention to what's going on is to have his boss call a meeting to talk about the topic that we're working on. And that's when the Security Council started having these meetings talking about aviation cybersecurity. That was a part of it. They were doing some stuff, but we helped nudge it a little further. So I can at least say I'm proud of that. And what I want you to appreciate is this is at the time in that 2014 to 2017 period that you just had the North Korea hacks with Sony. So we're worried about North Korea. We're starting to talk about what we think is Russian entities on our critical infrastructure. We haven't started talking about Russian entities and election hacking yet. We've been talking about Chinese stealing our intellectual property. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of meetings. It's some sweet action working in the bureaucracy to go to meetings all the time. Not really, hence prison sentence when I was at the Pentagon. But understanding what's happening and making this a priority to get it to rise to the level where things are getting done. That's the good news story part of this. So again, what I want you to take away is that things are happening, could be faster, but they're moving along, and that's good. If you don't believe anything I've said, I don't care what those people are doing, I don't believe that they're actually caring, I'll at least throw up one more example to try to convince you to believe my idea that good things are happening. So the top half is written by one group, the bottom half is written by another group. I'll give you a minute to read through them. Is there anything in either one of those statements that makes you go, whoa, no way I'm supporting that? Do you see any big differences between the two statements and what's written, as if two groups that are off in different lands, completely thinking about things differently, are writing about them differently? Either you're all asleep or you totally agree, and I'll take either one of those. So some things I'll highlight from there where I think the similarities jump out. How they're both looking at the different threats and the fact that we know somebody is trying to exploit them. The fact that we know this is a big deal across the ecosystem to our economic security, national security, passenger safety, however you want to think about it. Does anybody know where that top set of statements came from, what the source is? Government. How about the bottom? I'm the Cavalry. How do you know? Did you see my slides ahead of time? No. All right. You're right. So, no kidding, right out of the National Security Strategy for Aviation Safety that I showed you before, and when we were writing the statement of values for the aviation village that's going to be at DEF CON in a couple of days, that's the language. We didn't look at the security strat. I promise you, we did not use that as a reference at all. But it's the same idea. We're all working to the same goals. We're all looking at the same thing. We should not be talking differently and separately and not engaging each community with the good stakeholder and the capabilities they all bring to this problem. So What can you do to get involved? Anybody know about Hackers on the Hill during BSides DC? Yeah, so Bo walked out of the room. Josh, I think they have been a big part of it because of the I Am The Cavalry work. When you're in town for BSides DC and they say, hey, who in the hacker community wants to go talk to the congressional staffers? These are the folks that are writing and drafting the laws and bills that the congressmen are voting on, and they don't always have the technical background that you have. But if they talk to you and they tell you what problems they have, you can help them solve that. And when you understand, hey, that person's not so bad. They really are trying to do good work. They're not the stereotype I thought they were. Then you're willing to engage with them also. And that's a good thing. So you're just getting to know each other if nothing else, let alone actually working on issues and coming up with solutions and solving those problems. What's that lead to? I think everybody knows I kept pointing to Bo, and if there's any doubt at all, the outrageous speaker demand that I asked for that I completely forgot was Bo Woods in a Vegas showgirl headdress. So that's why he had that on. I'm sad he's not here, but please thank him for that. So, but that's Bo on the left in the red shirt at DEF CON. That's Josh Corman. For those of you who know, and you may be in a part of this track and participating in it, but those guys helping out with Hackers on the Hill. So in return, let's bring the congressman out to DEF CON. That's Congressman Langevin sitting down, and that's Congressman Hurd standing up. Came out here last year at DEF CON to talk to you all, to find out what your problems are, to tell you what they're working on, to find out and ask for your help solving them. And that's happening again. I don't know the exact details, and I don't know if it's these guys or not, but I know there's congressmen coming out, engaging to make sure that you know what's going on and they can and get your help. So again, another way that you can help solve these problems. DHS, Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure Program. That dude right there is doing some of that, Jay. There'll be some folks talking about the Aviation Village about some of those things. DHS is getting better and improving, and when you want to get a company's attention, when you want to engage with them because you found something and you want to solve it, they can help you with that. It hasn't always been great. It's getting much better. That's where they're available to help, so they're there for you. Hack the Pentagon, Defense Digital Service. If you've heard of Hack the Pentagon, there's Hack the Air Force, there's Hack the Marines, there's Hack the Army. I'm sure Hack the Navy, either I'm missing it or they're soon to jump in. Ways that you can do bug bounty programs, helping each one of the military services across a variety of things that they want your help finding the vulnerabilities. Some of these things, and I'm 99% sure, and we'll confirm at the Aviation Village, some of this they have with Hack the Air Force as far as aircraft equipment. So you're in here hearing about aviation cyber. You can talk to those guys if you want to focus on just that. But again, ways that the military and that bureaucracy is starting to understand there's ways to engage you and bring your talents in and get some good value and interactions out of it. And then finally, I Am the Cavalry. That's the track you're here. And then I mentioned it before, but I want to make sure the logo's up there and it's very, very clear. At DEF CON, first time Aviation Village. So Random Man's going to talk about ADSB and how to create a, what's it, tell me again. I don't want to say it wrong.
Just a receiver, basic one, how to get into listening, pulling this data out of the air, listening to the aircraft directly, and yeah.
Yep, so he's one of the workshops. We've got multiple sets of speakers talking about a variety of topics. Increase your understanding of how aircraft systems work. Increase understanding of how the navigation systems work. Meet the Defense Digital Service folks. There's going to be lots of demos of some of the technologies and things that you can understand aircraft systems. And if you want to do more work with them, you can talk to them. I'll be there as a volunteer. If you want to talk more pilot stuff, I can offer you that perspective. We've got some Air Force folks coming in that are doing things. And if nothing else, we have an F-35 simulator. So if you just want to come in and fly something around, it's pretty cool. It's not an F-22, the best airplane, but it's pretty darn good. So lots of good reasons there. And like I said, again, it's a chance to come in, get engaged, meet the folks that are involved in this, and then help figure out where you contribute to those efforts. So with that, I am done. I will gladly take your questions. I also understand exactly what's happening between right now and the time that you clap and walk out and go to the bar. So what kind of questions do you have for me? And there's Bo in his headdress.
Yeah, I had to step out a minute, but did you ever mention Aviation, Isaac?
I did not. not purposely leaving them out. I thought of them more as industry, and I focused on government and the hacker side of things versus trying to pick out industry because I'm wary. I don't want to represent what companies are doing. I don't want to talk about things I shouldn't be talking about. So that was consciously, and I put the ISAC in the industry part of that.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I had, when I had gained access to Boeing, they were pretty
Yep.
great about fixing it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ISAC, I would say, well, DHS and ISAC are together because that's where the ISACs came from, but lots of good cooperation, lots of good talent and smart things there. So absolutely another avenue to go to if you need help. You bet.
I just have a question regarding international cooperation. Seeing as aviation is naturally an international
Absolutely.
kind of business.
Yep.
Is there any work with the IATA or like Transport Canada? Because any standards that we improve upon
Yeah.
need to be deployed globally.
Yep. So again, I don't want to get into details of, I'd rather the person I know who's doing that. Absolutely. Super smart folks, similar backgrounds to mine that understand here's the issues, here's the flying perspective on it, here's the security research perspective on it, and at those levels. Because like you said, a lot of what we do in the US is because of what's done internationally, because there's no reason to be different. And we have to fit into that entirety of that ecosystem. So yeah, absolutely that kind of work's going on. And that's also, go back to your question about the aviation ISAC, the European version of that. So absolutely all those things are being considered. And there was a question on this side. Dave, you can't ask me a question.
Or can I? So, Steve, I'm wondering if you have thoughts or suggestions for how lay people, that is to say, non-pilots, non-aviation folks, just cybersecurity practitioners or researchers who they've not focused on this specific issue, but do you have thoughts or suggestions, or perhaps others do, about effective ways to get into the game?
So I would say I'm probably more in that category. Just because I've flown an airplane doesn't mean I know jack shit about aviation cyber. Sorry to ruin the surprise. But the idea that when I talked about before, I know how to react to an aircraft emergency. I know how to handle things there, no matter what causes it, right? So, but I can at least offer the perspective when I put on my security hat and what I know from that or the policy side. So I would say there's plenty of opportunities. Depends on which one of those you want to pick. So the way you described it of, if you're just a security professional, you have those skills, you bet. You could be contributing on the policy side. You could be contributing, talking to pilots, going, here's the focus, here's why you're not going to know what's going on. That's okay. That's what the security folks are doing here. You've got your procedures to fall back on. So I think there are a lot of ways that they're just not that obvious, but they need to be talked about, and that's where the contribution can come in to make sure that dialogue's happening, to appreciate the extent of the problem or where it isn't really a problem depending on where it falls. I'd be interested if anybody else has thoughts on that too. Yeah, what you got, bro?
Yeah, for my research with ADSB, it was literally just sitting around reading public documents, going through parsing them, realizing how the system worked, and then applying the hacker mentality of, okay, I'm seeing a problem here, unencrypted, unauthenticated, bad words to be seeing, and then like not finding that there was mitigations in any public documents and asking the questions. Everybody in the industry seemed to be thinking a lot about, oh yeah, we built the system, we implemented it. Now we'll move on to this other thing. They never looked back and said, oh, well, SDRs came out. That's a game changer for a lot of things. They never look back with that critical eye. So I think the more eyes you have on these potential issues, and it can be just as easy. You don't need to have a cockpit worth of equipment or anything like that. Like I said, everything I did was just public documents.
Yeah, I think ADSB is a good example. When I look at it, the open architecture, what it does to provide more information to more aircraft. You can squish more together vertically so they can fly closer together. Instead of having to follow a highway like a car, they can just go here to here to here, because that's the best way to go. And if I can time deconflict as well as altitude, or all of that's good. So yes, let's make it open. Let's share the heck out of it. How did that work? How did that work when we had this nice open unsecure internet, and now all the lessons we're learning, we're kind of seeing some of that on the ADSB side. How much do we need to worry about it? Should we worry about it? All of those questions, absolutely. So there's good perspectives that you can bring to that discussion. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? You mentioned congressional leadership coming to conferences like this to learn more about the topic. Two-part question. One, is that a recent evolution? And two, do you think overall congressional leadership is given the appropriate amount of information or attention to a topic like this?
So I'm going to answer because I have the experts sitting in front of me. So yes, I believe last year's DEF CON, when the congressman coming out 2 years ago, sorry, that's the first time that ever happened?
2015. So 2015, in 2015, Hurd and Swalwell came and did a talk at Crypto Privacy Village. In 2017, Josh and I brought members of Congress, Hurd and then Langevin out for a bigger event, give them a tour of some of the villages and things. Last year, a bunch of congressional staffers came on a delegation from the Wilson Center. This year, I'm teaming up with the Wilson Center to bring members and staffers, and we're going to be over there. Aviation Village is on the list of places to stop by and look. So there's an increasing amount of participation among congressional leadership, or the grunts who do the actual work, like the staffers, and we're trying to get them the bridges built so that they can have more direct communications with our community.
And that's, I think, the answer also to the second half of your question, because I wasn't going to touch that one, but it's the idea of getting the right people there, because if you don't even have the conversation, it's getting all that technical expertise up to them. Absolutely. Yeah. Other questions? I'll be around. Sorry. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back a bit to the news stories, the sensationalized news stories over there. But do you think that actually, that needed to happen? I'm not talking about the headlines or the presentation, but even the researchers' work. I know Hugo and Ruben, they've not necessarily gone big from the start. They started with small things, right, and they kept getting ignored or downplayed. And this is because obviously companies or institutions go into a defensive mode and say, well, this is not really that big of a deal. And they say, well, no, it is. And next year they come with something even bigger to prove them wrong. And I think that does help in a way, and it led to this, to what we have now. Hackers having a challenge, having to prove them wrong.
Totally agree with that. So please do not take away any thought that shouldn't have happened. Let me phrase it this way. It shouldn't have happened, because if industry and government were more responsive, were more ready for it, absolutely they would have gotten the response they were looking for. But what concerns me is if that's the only thing that this crowd knows is going on, because you don't hear, oh, the government did their job today stories. Who cares? That's not exciting, and I wouldn't read that story. But you hear these other things, and the tendency is they come out and become sensationalized. So the idea is it shouldn't have been that way. I totally agree with that. I'm certain is the pea that started rolling down the hill and became a snowball and is now kicking everybody in the ass, and things are happening. That's awesome. That's a whole nother talk, debate, and everything about all of that. But here's where we are. So hopefully I can at least offer the little teeny tiny glimmer of hope that I can of things are getting better. People are listening, getting past stereotypes. Like I said, the example of you all are strange, you're media, so you don't count. But the idea that, like I said, Renderman, who graciously said, yes, you can use my picture. And I talk about it, and I go, look, here's this dude, Renderman. He looks different. He does things different. He's tired of waiting on your bullshit, and therefore he's going to do what it takes to get the word out. And they're all like, There was, I think it was very well received as far as, yeah, okay, I guess he's not all that strange, right?
I was just asking questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's my evidence. Please prove me wrong.
Yeah, help me help you fix it, exactly. So,
Discussion afterwards, where people putting him in a corner and yelling at him. Sat him back and watched all these people that were in different fields, that were basically going, no, you're lying, no, you're this, no, you're that. So please prove me wrong.
yeah, your motivation is this, your whatever is that. And I know there's plenty of media in the room. I'm not bashing on you guys. I get it. You have a hard job. It's a pain to try to translate, and sometimes it gets sensationalized, whether or not you intended it, whether or not the person you're talking about intended it, it happens. But that's what gets picked up. I showed you before that Atlantic Council report, that got rolled out, I think it was a Wednesday, and there was panel discussions, and all this stuff was going out. I'm like, I'm gonna show my mom this picture, this is great. I got to be on a panel, yeehaw. Thursday, government employee that talked about the hacking, the article I showed you, that was at a conference. Friday night, that's on the NBC News. There's no coverage of what we did. Steve can't show his mom what was on TV, and why would you? Right? It's just not going to make the news. Those are the things that get talked about. But again, it's knowing what else is going on out there and knowing there are other avenues that you can get things done and get engaged and get talking with the right people, and the media is still there as an option, and it helps the media know who to go talk to. So I think to me, it's good for everybody knowing who's available and who to start engaging with correctly. And to dig in and go find out more about these other things, because there's a lot of good work, and it'd be awesome to hear about. And today the government did a good job. That'd be pretty neat. I'm not even in government anymore, and I'd be happy to see that.
The weirdest night was when that report came out from DHS. Basically, it proved I wasn't crazy. And it was DHS that proved that. That was weird. Not what I expected.
What else? Okay, I'll be around. No kidding. Thank you. Last talk on the first day. You're still here, and you stayed till the end. I really appreciate it. So, any questions I can answer, anything else? Otherwise, have a good night.